I, 33 male, recently attended my younger brother's, 31, wedding, and I'm struggling with something that happened there. I'm aware that reaching out to the internet for advice isn't always the best decision, but I realize this issue involves a lot of personal bias and feelings within my family, which is why I could use some outside perspective. A little backstory: my brother and I didn't have the best relationship growing up. I wasn't a good older brother to him or our other siblings, and part of that was because I was an immature, insecure kid who targeted my brother specifically a lot. In fact, I was downright awful to him at times. We come from a conservative family, and while that's not an excuse, it was part of why I behaved the way I did. This didn't change until we were both adults, but I've since grown up, realized how wrong I was and solved out some internalized problems. I have apologized to him several times over the past few years. He's been polite, but things have been distant. I only see him on special occasions like family birthdays and holidays, but even those are rare. A few months ago, I got an invitation to his wedding, which surprised me. I hadn't spoken to him about it, but after talking with my sister, I decided to go. It felt rude not to. At the wedding, I mostly spent time catching up with family, and after a while, I went to say hi to my brother when I saw him at the gift table. That's when things took a turn. Before I could even get a word out, he already looked uncomfortable. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, but there was this underlying tension I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then, out of nowhere, he told me he hadn't wanted me there at all. He said that while his husband had insisted on inviting me, he himself wasn't ready to have me at such an important event in his life and that I should have known that. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say and was embarrassed. The conversation ended awkwardly. Feeling embarrassed and unwelcome, I left the wedding early and spent the rest of the day overthinking everything. It's been a few days, and I haven't contacted my brother since. My other family members are split, with some saying maybe I should have known better. I'm unsure if I should reach out to him or just give him space. It's not that I don't understand why he feels the way he does, but at some point, I feel like his resentment is making things worse. It's putting our family in this awkward position where people start taking sides, and it feels like I'm constantly being judged for something I've already apologized for multiple times. I don't want our family to keep seeing me as the person I used to be, because that's not who I am anymore. So, Ida for attending his wedding when I was invited, but apparently not welcome? Commenter: info, did you RSVP, so that he knew you had indicated you were going to attend? Also, was the targeting of your brother based on his being gay and or bisexual? Oop, downvoted, I actually didn't directly RSVP. The invitation I received was specifically for family and only covered the ceremony and reception. It didn't specify if it required an RSVP, so I assumed the ceremony was all-inclusive. I talked it over with my sister and eventually decided to attend since we both thought it would be rude not to. I assumed the invite was genuine, but looking back, maybe I should have reached out to my brother directly to confirm and clear any confusion. And to answer your second question, yes, his sexual orientation definitely played part in the past, but it was not the only focus. I didn't want to emphasize that too much in my post because my actions were wrong regardless of him being gay. Commenter: downvoted, I see it from a different perspective, as I have gone through the same. I was not the best older sister. I held a lot of baggage when I was younger that stemmed from a lot of family drama. I was 13 when it started. Long story short, I was very mean to my younger sister, but after becoming an adult, changing how I looked at the world and, as Op said, became an adult. I apologized for the things I did. My family may never forget, but for those that didn't, they just don't invite me to things. My sister, however, even though we aren't close, lets the past be exactly that, the past. It's time for Op's brother to let the past stay in the past, be civil for the family or just don't go. Inviting someone when you don't want them to go is putting others in a situation that can result in even more damage to the relationship. Oop, downvoted, I appreciate you saying that. I understand that healing takes time and I've always tried to respect that. Though it can be frustrating to feel like I'm still being judged for my past actions when I've worked hard to change, especially when I'm reminded of it as if I'm still like that. Thank you for sharing your experience. Commenter: I don't think you're the asshole for attending, but I do think generally Uda. You bullied your brother, possibly crossing the line into abuse, at an incredibly formative time in his life. I hope you've sincerely changed, but it's understandably hard for him to move on from that and trust you. He could have made better choices regarding this specific event, including denying you an invitation or separately communicating that he'd rather you declined. But don't trust the technically correct, the best kind of correct type of NTA answers you'll get on here. In this particular instance, Uda for the past, not this specific incident. Sorry. I hope you and your brother can eventually both heal from what you did to him when you were young. Oop, thank you for your honesty. I fully acknowledge that my past behavior was hurtful and that I crossed serious boundaries. I understand how difficult it must be for my brother to trust me after everything. While I didn't intend to intrude on his special day, I'm willing to accept that my past actions make me an asshole in this situation. Thanks again for sharing your perspective. Commenter: NTA and Uda. You were invited. You didn't know you weren't welcome. You did the right thing by leaving. You think he needs to suck it up and get over it? You admitted you were horrible to him. Put yourself in his shoes. Would you have been happy to see you? Oop, downvoted, damn, that's harsh, but you make a valid point. I can see how my actions might have come off as inconsiderate, especially given my past. It's a tough pill to swallow, but I appreciate you calling me out on it. Though I have to say I never expected him to forget about it. I'm not trying to pretend it didn't happen, and I'm willing to face the consequences. Thank you for your perspective. Commenter, Uda, just because you apologized it doesn't take the long-term abuse away. You admit you were horrible and you think a few apologies will fix it? You're wrong. You are being judged because of your actions. These are the consequences for your bad behavior. If you say you're a better person, prove it. You don't prove it by saying he is creating issues with his resentment. Wrong thing to say and think. This is your mess. Don't you dare put any of this on him. Give him space. Don't try to convince others you're better. Show them. Give him time. You owe more than a few apologies. Oop, downvoted. I completely hold myself accountable for my past actions, and I understand that apologies alone don't erase the hurt I caused. My intention in discussing my brother's resentment was to express how complicated things are, but I realize I need to focus on my own role in this situation. This post is mainly about the wedding incident, and I'll take your advice to give him space and time to process everything. I still have a lot to prove. Thank you for the reminder. Commenter, at some point, I feel like his resentment is mock-ing it worse abso-fucking-lutely does not square with I completely hold myself accountable for my past actions // oop, downvoted. You're right that my statements may seem contradictory, and I recognize that I need to clarify my thoughts. I fully accept that I was a bully to my brother, and I don't want to downplay the impact of my past actions. When I mentioned feeling like his resentment is making things worse, I didn't mean to imply that he's in the wrong for how he feels. I just hope to express my concern about the strain it puts on our family dynamics. Yes, my family has moved on and accepted him for who he is much sooner than I did, and I'm glad he felt comfortable inviting them. However, my upbringing by our parents shaped my homophobic views and made me struggle with my own sexuality. I'm not trying to make my brother seem like the bad guy, but rather, our parents. I recognize that my brother harbors the most anger toward me because I was the biggest bully during his childhood. However, it's painful to see the rest of our family rally around him without acknowledging the impact our upbringing had on both of us. I've become the primary target of his resentment, and while I understand it's easier to direct that anger at one person, it feels like I'm carrying the weight of our family's past actions, and not just my own. Commenter, this sounds like you're trying to wash your hands of blame by saying it's your family's fault that you bullied him, and think you shouldn't be held responsible. Your actions are your own fault, not theirs. Did any of them bully him for his sexuality? There are plenty of people that are raised in very outwardly bigoted families and even as young teens do not have the same beliefs or do not bully or abuse people due to sexuality / race / religion / gender. You say you struggled with your own sexuality, are you also LGBTQIA+? Oop, I definitely think I should be held responsible. It's difficult to express the complex dynamics within my family in a short Reddit post / comment, which is why it may sound like I'm trying to shift the blame. I'm not. My actions were mine alone, but they weren't the only ones. I can't say for sure if any of my siblings bullied my brother for his perceived sexuality, but there was a lot of subtle prejudice within the family that we all carried. I'm currently still trying to accept and understand my own identity. I'm not ready to label myself, but I can say I'm attracted to men. I didn't include this in my original post because it's something I struggle with to this day. But I recognize that my own internal conflict contributed to the way I treated my brother, and it's making it more difficult for me to understand how he feels comfortable around our family, excluding only me. Commenter, were you bullied for being gay? Abandoning your responsibility is a bad look. Oop, downvoted. While I can't tell if that's a rhetorical question or not, I will address it. No, I was not bullied for being gay, but I was scared of the possibility, which is why I became the bully. It was a misguided attempt to cope, and I deeply regret the pain I caused him. I'm working on facing those issues now, but it's challenging when I see how much my past has impacted only our relationship. Now, I see him staying close to our family while keeping distance from me, and it feels like a double-edged sword. He finds support and acceptance with them, which I'm glad for, but it also highlights my role as a source of hurt in his childhood. He can navigate a relationship with them, who were part of our shared struggles, yet can't reconcile that with me, the one who could have been his ally but instead contributed to his pain. I'm not saying that he's responsible for that at all, I am, but that it's a painful fact I'm trying to accept. Update 1. I spoke to my sister, who had a lot more insight into how the wedding was organized. I admit that I'm not very familiar with weddings or the etiquette around them, and she helped me understand a few things that I didn't fully grasp at the time. Regarding the RSVP confusion, the invitation I got was addressed to me by name, but it was more of a general family invite, without a clear RSVP request. Coming from a Spanish background, RSVPing for family events isn't always strictly followed, especially for close family members. I didn't think twice and assumed I was welcome unless I heard otherwise. I later found out that there was an MC handling RSVPs, and my sister asked on my behalf if I could attend, since I decided to go somewhat last minute. This was still possible, since it was a big venue and they purposefully had more seats prepared than necessary. From what I understand now, it's possible that the couple wasn't fully aware of who was attending by the time the wedding came around, especially if the RSVPs were being managed externally. Since the invite only included ceremony and reception, there were no main meals for me to attend, which could explain why RSVP was less necessary. I'm not trying to defend myself here, just clarifying some things. I realize it was a bad move not to communicate my attendance sooner. Commenter, info, other than a basic "I'm sorry, what have you done to improve things with your brother?" Do you reach out to him to see how he is or what he's been up to? Have you expressed any interest in actually having a relationship with him and his husband? It sounds as though he is basically NC with you. Have you had an in-depth conversation with him about what you can do to make it up to him or how you can show that you've apparently changed? What have you actually done to change? What do you do/say that would show not only your brother, but other members of your family, that you have actually changed? Do you actually want a relationship with your brother, or do you just not want to be thought less of because of your actions and you want people to forget? Are your changes just not actively bullying him but still having the same mindset and doing/saying the same things to others that you've done to him in the past? You raise some valid points, and I appreciate your directness. In past situations where I apologized to my brother in person, he often made it clear that he wasn't willing to hear me out completely. He said it's fine and that he doesn't need more than my amends. This led me to keep my distance, though we've never completely cut off contact. I assumed he didn't desire a personal relationship but was okay with me being present at family events. I haven't reached out to him through text, calls, or letters in recent years, and neither has he. I only try to connect face to face when possible. I want to believe I genuinely want a relationship with him because I care, but I recognize that it might also stem from my own desire to make things right. I'm okay with not having a brotherly bond, but I'd like to be on good terms so we can converse without the constant reminder of our shared history. I can confidently say that my mindset and behavior have changed. I haven't just apologized to my brother, I've reached out to other family members and people I've hurt as well. I'm actively trying to be a better person, even though it's a struggle. I realize that change takes time, especially if you're still in the same environment, which may be why my family doesn't see the changes as clearly as my new circle does. Thank you for holding me accountable and prompting this reflection. I wish I could say I've demonstrated my growth to him, or my family, directly, but the truth is I haven't made much of an effort to show him any change, mainly because I'm not quite sure how. I've changed my mindset and behavior over the years, working on becoming a better person, but I've mostly done that in isolation and in a new environment. I haven't actively tried to reconnect with him, so he has no reason to believe I'm different now, other than stories from family members like my sister, who's been part of my personal journey. It was a mistake on my part to assume I could show up and have things magically be okay without having done the real work to fix our relationship beforehand. Update 2. Even though I received the NTA judgment, I do believe many of you said I was the a-hole overall, and I'm willing to accept that. I didn't intend to withhold important information to tilt the verdict in my favor. In fact, I appreciate so many people holding me accountable for my irresponsible behavior. I did not reach out to my brother after the post. While I was considering sending a letter at some point or maybe indirectly sending a message through someone he trusts more than me, it was not necessary because, as it turns out, my brother isn't as passive anymore as I thought he was. Last night, I received an email from him and his husband, apologizing for the incident at the wedding and explaining why it happened. Their MC, who is also a good friend of theirs, had not communicated my last-minute decision to attend their wedding, which is why my presence caught my brother off guard. He admitted to not being ready to see me, even though my intentions weren't bad. Thankfully, the incident was something he was able to forget during the day, and only been nagging on him a few days after, which is why he sent the email. I responded with a brief apology on my part, and I said I would keep my distance from now on. I added that if he ever feels the need to talk to me, he can reach out to me whenever, but that I will not force a relationship between us anymore. I want to thank everyone for their honest judgment, advice and questions. This has been a hard but necessary wake-up call. While I'm still processing a lot of it, I've realized that the work on myself is far from over. My priority now is to keep focusing on personal growth and to respect my brother's boundaries. Whether we reconnect or not is up to him, and I have to be okay with that. Now on to second story. Husband got caught undressing with his ex-wife on our son's birthday. Now he's begging for forgiveness and I'm torn. I, 27 male, and my husband, 37 male, have been married for 3 years, dating for 6. He has an ex-wife, 37F, which he divorced a year before we met. We have a son, 7 meters, who was adopted after we got married and who I love as my own child, because he is. I know my husband, Peter, fake name, is bisexual. I have no problem with it, and I had no problem with his ex-wife, Allison, also fake name. I did have a problem with his family as they're a bit homophobic and are always telling Peter he should get back together with Allison. Well, 2 weeks ago, we were at his family's town because it was my son, Jack's, fake name, birthday, and we wanted to spend it as family. My mother-in-law decided it would be a good idea to invite Allison, so she arrived in the middle of the party. I didn't want to ruin Jack's birthday, so I stayed quiet. I spent all my time with Jack, playing with him and his cousins at his request. When it was time to cut the cake, I noticed Allison and Peter weren't there, So I went inside and looked for them around the house. I found them in Peter's old bedroom taking their clothes off. I stood there in shock for a moment, but then I left and went back to celebrating Jack's birthday. Part of me wanted to scream and cry, but I also was in shock and I refused to make Jack's birthday about me. We cut the cake and opened the presents. People were already leaving when Allison and Peter came back. Peter took me aside and started saying that I shouldn't have cut the cake without him present and it was disrespectful. I stared at him and just said, "I'm sorry, I just thought you'd be too busy getting into your ex-wife's pants." He got quiet, so I took Jack and left the house to go back to the hotel. Once I put Jack in bed and made sure he was asleep, I locked myself in the bathroom and broke down. I called a friend and he tried his best to console me. I only calmed down in the morning when I took Jack for breakfast because I didn't want him to see me like that. I'm now watching him play in the park and I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him to have a broken family. I don't want him to know that relationships aren't a happy ever after. Peter has been calling and texting, apologizing for everything, and I'm tempted to forgive him. I'm tempted to just have my family back, and all my friends are saying that it was just a mistake, that he was vulnerable and Allison is his ex-wife. So what am I supposed to do now? I need the advice from people who don't know my husband or me personally. Update 1. Peter and Allison didn't notice me when I saw them. There was music very loud downstairs and they weren't facing the door. 2. I didn't stop them because I was in shock. I just stood there for a moment and I heard my son, so I unconsciously focused on him. I was pretty much in autopilot. 3. Peter didn't come to the hotel with me because I changed to a different one. He did try to follow me, but I took a taxi and left. As far as I know, he's staying with his parents and Allison left. 4. We met when I was 20 and he was 30, we started as friends, and we ended up dating. Yes, we're both men and no, I didn't feel manipulated or groomed by him. Those were the most asked things and I did answer some comments, not all. Now on to the update. I did as some of you said and took some tests to discard any STIs or STDs. The results are coming back in a few days, and I will take another one in 3 weeks to be sure. My son is having a sleepover with a friend and I decided to speak with my husband. He came by our house. After a few minutes I texted him. He asked about Jack and I told him where he was. Then we sat on the couch and started talking. I started crying after a few minutes and he followed after. I asked some simple questions: when? Why? How many times? Among others, NT. His is what I could figure out by all the things he said. It happened for the first time when he visited his parents alone 2 years ago. They invited her, they both got drunk, he was feeling lonely as I had been more attention to Jack since we adopted him, and they slept together. Nothing happened again until our son's birthday party. He said his mother pressured him a bit and he caved in. I don't believe he did it for that reason, but I don't know. He said he doesn't love her and I believe him, but it doesn't negate the fact of what he did. After talking for a while, I told him that I wanted a divorce. He started sobbing and begging for another chance, but I told him that I can't give him another chance because I wouldn't be able to trust him again and I don't want that in a relationship. He kept crying and begging for another 30 minutes until I told him that we have to think about Jack and his well-being, that we could stay friends DS and co-parent him. He got mad, really mad. He started yelling that it was all Jack's fault, that we shouldn't have adopted him, that he's the one who's getting between us. I was crying and really scared. I had never seen him this angry. He hit the table and stormed out of the house. I called the house where Jack is staying at and told them if Peter shows up there, they can't open the door. After the little episode, I was scared that Peter would try to hurt Jack. I called my friend again, Thomas, and told him everything that happened. He came by and is staying with me until I'm better. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what to do and how to go on with the divorce. Update 2. I'll try to summarize it. My husband has been showing up at my work, following me, and calling me from burner phones. I was afraid he'd go after Jack like many of you said he would, but he didn't. He said a lot of stuff, but I'll try to write the important things. He said that he missed when we were just us, that I stopped paying attention to him when we adopt, and that Jack, that I wasn't his, anymore. He said that he missed how dependent I was on him. I was very insecure when we met, but I started working on my issues when we adopted Jack because I didn't want to be a bad example for him. When we got married, I used to get sick all the time. I was weak and tired, so he would take care of me 24/7. The doctors couldn't tell what was wrong with me and I didn't get better until a bit after we adopted Jack. I guess that dependence, it's what he missed? Yesterday, he followed me to work and started screaming that I was his and that we made vows to stay together. We had to call security and he waited for me next to my car. I panicked and took a taxi home. He keeps messaging me and showing up to our house. I took a few weeks off work to be with Jack, although he's taking this better than me. I made an appointment with a therapist for him, and when the divorce is finalized, I'll go to one myself.